Have you ever heard of a child born blind, who could see more than anyone else in the entire kingdom? Not with her eyes, but with her heart. This is not just a story. This is a legend, a whispered tale from the heart of Nyandula, a kingdom carved into the soul of ancient Africa. A tale about an orphan girl named Ayana, abandoned, blind, yet destined to change everything. In the shadow of the great baobab forest, where sunlight filtered in like whispers from the spirits, lay a forgotten village called Sinoga. It was not on any map. Not even the traders dared cross the cursed lands that surrounded it. Here lived a blind girl named Ayana. She was no more than 13 summers old. Her skin dark as the midnight sky, her hair braided with beads carved from river stones, her eyes pale, cloudy, unmoving. Yet when she turned her head, you felt she was looking directly into your soul. She had no mother, no father, no name, until the village elder had once muttered, "She is Ayana, the silent wind that speaks." And so it was. Ayana spent her days walking barefoot on the river stones, her cane made of ashwood tapping gently against the earth. She spoke little, but when she did, the air around her changed. Animals would stop, the leaves would still, even the wind would pause to listen. But the villagers feared her. "She's cursed," they whispered. "She hears the ancestors. She walks with spirits." So they kept their distance. But one night, that distance would vanish. It was the 7th moon of the harvest season. Thunder rolled in with a rage never before heard. Lightning cracked open the sky. The village elder, Makora, was coughing badly in his hut, a man near the end of his journey. As the winds howled, he called out for the ancestors, but they did not answer. Ayana, miles away at the edge of the forest, suddenly stood up from her small grass mat. Her hands trembled, and a low hum rose from her lips. Her head tilted upward, as if hearing something only she could. "The king will be lost," she whispered to the night. "The crown will fall, unless the blind sees." Then she collapsed, far. From Sinoga, beyond the golden hills and mighty rivers, stood the royal city of Baruka, the capital of the kingdom of Nyandula. There, King Jabari ruled with wisdom and fear. But the land had turned against him. Rain had stopped falling. Crops rotted in the fields. The people murmured of betrayal, of bad omens. And in the temple of the ancestors, a sacred drum cracked, a sign that even the spirits were angry. The king summoned his advisors. "Find me the seer," he bellowed, "the one who can see what I do not, before my crown turns to dust." But the royal seer had died months earlier. And so the hunt began, for a prophet, a priest, a miracle worker. Word spread across valleys, through markets, over fires and under stars, and soon a name was whispered by a wandering trader who passed through Sinoga. "Ayana," he said, "the blind girl who hears the forest." The king did not hesitate. At dawn, iron-clad horses galloped into Sinoga. Dust rose like ghosts behind them. The villagers scattered. Ayana sat quietly by the river, her feet in the water, humming a tune she did not know she knew. The commander, dismounted, confused. "Where is the girl?" he barked. Ayana turned her head slowly, smiled faintly. "I have been waiting for you," she said. The commander froze. "She knows," whispered one soldier. The villagers peeked from their huts, afraid, confused, maybe even hopeful. "You are to come with us," said the commander, unsure whether to bow or order. Ayana stood. Without a word, she picked up her staff and walked past them toward the horses. Not one man dared stop her. The journey to the royal city took 6 days. Ayana barely spoke, but every night, as the fire crackled, she would turn her head toward the Akor forest and murmur, "He is afraid." and his brother grows bold. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. "Who is she speaking of?" one whispered. "She dreams while awake," another muttered. "We should not have brought her." But the commander stayed quiet. He had seen her eyes, and something about her presence unsettled him. When they reached the city gates, Ayana did not flinch at the grand towers, or the roaring guards, or the crowd that had gathered to stare. She simply said, "The lion is wounded, but the snake is already in his bed." And then she walked into the palace. King Jabari stood tall, though sleepless, in his royal robes. His eyes had lost their shine. The crown on his head seemed heavier than ever before. When Ayana was brought before him, he scoffed. "This is the great seer?" he barked. "A child? A blind orphan?" But Ayana raised her hand. "Your Majesty," she said gently, "you do not need eyes to see. What you need is to listen." The court laughed, but the king did not. He stared at her, something rising inside him. A flicker, a memory, a fear. "What do you hear, girl?" he asked. Ayana tilted her head. "I hear a blade under your bed. I hear whispers from your brother's chamber. I hear your crown slipping, not from age, but from betrayal." The room went silent. Then the king whispered, "Follow me." And for the first time in years, he left the court in silence. The sun had not yet risen over Baruka when King Jabari led Ayana through a winding staircase deep beneath the palace. This was no ordinary room. It was the Chamber of Echoes. Only the king and his bloodline could enter. Inside, the walls were inscribed with centuries-old prophecies, painted with red clay and ash. Torches flickered like nervous hearts. Ayana stood quietly at the center. "This place," she whispered, "remembers pain." The king turned slowly. No one has spoken those words in over 100 years. Ayana's pale eyes scanned the empty space as if reading invisible pages. "You were warned," she said, "but you did not listen." "What warning?" the king snapped, stepping closer. Ayana reached out and touched a stone tablet. Her fingers followed the curves of the ancient symbols. "When the river dries and the crown shakes, the blind will arrive and the bloodline will break," she recited. The king's face paled. He had read that line himself as a boy, but no one had ever understood its meaning until now. Prince Obasi, the king's younger brother, was a man of elegance, charm, and quiet danger. In public, he smiled like sunlight. In private, his words were venom. He had grown restless. The kingdom was faltering, and Jabari's once strong rule was now plagued by famine, drought, and whispers of rebellion. "My brother has become a shadow of himself," he murmured to his advisor, a sly man named Kano. "The people adore you more with each passing day," Kano said. Obasi stared at the golden statue in the courtyard. An image of Jabari carved in better times. "I do not wish to kill him," he said softly. "Only to relieve him of his burden." Kano smiled. "Then let the serpent strike quietly." That night, Ayana was given a small room beside the royal library, but she did not sleep. Instead, she knelt in silence, her fingers brushing the stone floor. The air shifted. She inhaled deeply, and then it came, faster than breath. A vision. She saw fire rising from the riverbanks. She saw a child crying in a throne room, alone. She saw a dagger, held by a familiar hand. She woke up screaming. The guards rushed in. "Who enters the king's chamber tonight?" she demanded. The guards looked at one another. "No one," they said. But Ayana knew better. The next day, Ayana asked to see the king alone. He dismissed the court and sat with her in the gardens behind the palace. "There is a shadow within your walls," Ayana said. King Jabari narrowed his eyes. "I've suspected, but never had proof." Ayana picked up a fallen fig leaf and placed it in the king's hand. "You are holding this kingdom like this leaf," she said. "If you grip too hard, it breaks. If you let go, it flies away. You must learn how to guide the wind instead." The king sighed. "I have tried to rule wisely, but I feel cursed." "You are not cursed," Ayana said. "You are being watched." Suddenly, a rustling came from the bushes nearby. The guards drew their spears, but there was no one, just a feather, black as night, falling slowly to the ground. Ayana picked it up. "Obasi," she whispered, "the serpent has grown fangs." That evening, Prince Obasi called for a royal council. He claimed it was to discuss emergency food aid to the outer provinces, but instead, he spun a web of lies. He accused Ayana of being a fraud, a child witch who was manipulating the king's mind. "She's cast a spell on our beloved brother," he said with venom masked as concern. "She must be removed for the safety of the kingdom," the council murmured. One advisor dared speak up. "She has done no harm." "But harm is not always visible," Obasi countered. "Sometimes it is whispered." The vote was to be cast in the morning, and Obasi was confident it would fall in his favor. That night, Ayana sat in her chamber. She did not cry. Instead, she whispered to the wind, "Send me a sign." The candles flickered, and then a swarm of fireflies flew into the room, though the windows were closed. They danced around her, forming shapes, first a serpent, then a crown, then a tear. Ayana bowed her head. "It is time," she whispered. "Let the king see what I see." At dawn, Ayana requested an audience with King Jabari and brought him to the royal mirror, a sacred heirloom said to reveal the soul. "Look," she said. He gazed into the mirror, but instead of seeing himself, he saw a vision, a table of royal advisors. Obasi standing, a dagger hidden beneath his cloak. Poison dropped into a goblet. The king gasped. "It's true," he whispered. Ayana turned toward him. "You must not punish him with anger," she said. "That is what he expects. Punish him with truth." The king nodded slowly, and the game began. That day, the king held a feast. Obasi was given the seat of honor beside him. The crowd cheered. Then, the king raised a goblet and said, "Let us toast to trust, and to those who would never betray it." He handed his own goblet to Obasi. Obasi hesitated. His smile flickered, but it was too late. All eyes were on him. He tried to drink, but the goblet slipped from his hand, cracked on the stone floor. The wine hissed like venom, and the crowd fell, silent. Obasi stood frozen as the goblet shattered at his feet. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the king rose, his voice as calm as midnight air. "Why do your hands tremble, brother?" Obasi opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The court watched with bated breath. Ayana stepped forward. "Fear has many faces," she said softly. "But truth only wears one." Obasi's eyes darted toward her, filled with venom. "You've bewitched us all with riddles and tricks," he shouted. "This girl is not a savior, she is a curse." Ayana didn't flinch. "I do not need eyes to see what your heart hides." The king turned to his guards. "Search his chambers." Obasi's mouth twitched. "You dare!" But the order had been given. That evening, the royal guards returned with what they had found. A map of the royal palace with escape tunnels marked. Letters written to an enemy chieftain promising support in return for Nyandala's throne. A small vial of the same black poison that stained the broken goblet. The evidence was undeniable. The court gasped. Ministers murmured. Some wept. King Jabari stood still, his face unreadable. Finally, he turned to his brother. "You were my blood," he said. "But power was thicker than blood for you." Obasi was taken away in chains. His screams echoed down the marbled halls. And Ayana? She simply lowered her head. Word spread fast. Across Baruka, Then across every hill, river, and mountain, a blind orphan had uncovered treason in the royal family. A child who once slept by the river now stood beside the king. Villagers chanted her name. Markets sold clay figurines of her holding her ashwood cane. Elders told the tale to children by firelight, and in Sanyoga, the village that once shunned her, people wept. Women left bowls of fruit by the river in her honor. The old called her a spirit returned. Ayana, however, remained quiet. She asked for nothing and accepted even less. A week later, King Jabari summoned the Council of the Ancients, keepers of the spiritual traditions of Nyandala. They wore robes of deep red, beaded necklaces heavy with time. They circled Ayana slowly. "She is not normal," one elder murmured. "She is not cursed," another countered. "She is chosen." Ayana stood silently in the center of their circle, her hand pressed to her heart. The head elder stepped forward. "Child, what do you see when you dream?" Ayana spoke quietly. "I see a river. I see blood. I see light pouring through wounds. I see the kingdom rising from ashes." The elders all bowed. "She is the eye of the spirit." Though the king offered her riches, land, and titles, Ayana refused most of them. "I need no crown," she said, "only a voice." So King Jabari named her the Voice of Nyandala. She was given a seat in the royal court, not as a queen or a noble, but as a prophet. Every major decision would pass through her ears, not for approval, but for wisdom, and she offered it freely. "Do not build more walls," she once said. "Build longer tables. Do not strike before listening. Do not forget the soil that fed you when you were starving." Her words became law. After a full season in Baruka, Ayana asked to return home, just for a while. The king hesitated but agreed. She returned to Sinoga with a royal escort, though she walked on foot. The villagers fell to their knees, children reached for her cane, elders cried. The riverbanks were lined with gifts. Ayana smiled for the first time in months. She walked to the same place she used to sit by the water, the same stone, the same wind. Only now, everything was different. A little girl approached her. "You're not blind," the child said with innocent certainty. "You just see with your heart." Ayana leaned down, touched the girl's cheek. "And so do you." One night, as the stars danced over Sanyoga, Ayana coughed. It was soft at first, then harsher. Within days, her body grew weak. A fever came. The royal physician was summoned. The king himself arrived, but the sickness did not fade. Ayana lay in her old hut, wrapped in woven blankets. "I am not afraid," she whispered. "My time is not ending. It is changing." The king wept beside her. "You gave me back my throne, my life, my soul." Ayana smiled. "And you gave me something I never had. Faith." Ayana drifted in and out of sleep, but her mind was not still. It traveled. In her fevered dreams, she walked between two rivers. One flowed with stars, the other with fire. She met her mother there, young, radiant, her voice warm as sun on clay. "You've walked far, my Ayana." Ayana held her breath. "Is this the end?" Her mother shook her head. "No, the end is not for those who listen. You were not sent to stay but to show the path." And just like that, she faded. Ayana woke, drenched in sweat, breath shallow, but her heart calm. She knew what must be done. As the fever worsened, Ayana called for the king. He arrived at midnight, sitting beside her bed, refusing to speak for fear his voice might break. "You must write it down," she whispered. "Write what?" Jabari asked. "The words, the truths, the things people forget, the story of the forgotten ones, like me." Tears gathered in his eyes. "You are not forgotten," Ayana smiled faintly. "They forget until the sky darkens." She took his hand. "When I go, don't build statues. build schools. Teach them how to see without eyes." The king nodded, unable to speak. Ayana died with the sunrise. They said the clouds turned the color of ash and fire, that the river flowed backwards for a moment, that the birds went silent across Nyandala. Even nature paused for her passing. She was only 16, but she left behind more than memory. She left behind a movement. Her body was laid in the sacred grove of whispers, the resting place of Nyandala's greatest heroes. But the ceremony was like no other. Blind children were invited to lead the procession, each holding white lilies. Every province sent offerings, fabrics, drums, carved symbols of their clans. The king himself carried her ashwood cane. The people wept, not because she was gone, but because she had shown them how to live and how to forgive. 20 years passed. King Jabari ruled longer than any before him, known not for his conquests, but his compassion. Under his rule, Nyandala transformed. Every village had a school named the House of Ayana. Healers were trained in both spirit and science. Girls and boys were treated as equals in education, law, and land. And each year, on the day of her passing, the kingdom paused. Not in silence, but in song. They sang her lullaby, the one she used to hum by the river. And somewhere, it is said, the wind hums with them still. One day, a young boy in Sanyoga discovered a buried clay pot beneath the fig tree where Ayana used to sit. Inside, a scroll. It was written in ink, made from crushed berries and soot. It read, "If you find this, then you are the next." The world always needs someone to remind it how to see. Close your eyes and listen to the silence. You'll find the answers there. The scroll became sacred scripture. It was read aloud to every child in every school of Nyandala, and that boy, he too became a prophet, in stories told around fire pits, in lullabies sung by mothers in mountain huts, in lessons whispered by elders under baobab trees. Ayana lives on. She is no longer the blind orphan. She is the spirit child, the river's whisper, the kingdom's soul. And so, dear listener, the tale of Ayana reminds us, true vision is not of the eyes, but of the spirit. Power is not in gold or throne, but in kindness, courage, and truth. And the smallest voice can echo through the ages. Close your eyes and listen. What do you hear? It had been 35 years since Ayana's passing. In the bustling city of Baruka, a young scholar named Mosi arrived at the royal archives. He had walked for days, barefoot, with only a satchel of notes and a heart full of purpose. He was obsessed with the story of Ayana, not the polished version told by nobles, but the raw, human tale whispered by old women in distant villages. She didn't just save a king, Mosi said to the gatekeeper. She rewrote what it meant to see. He was allowed access, and there, buried under forgotten scrolls and worn leather journals, Mosi found her, Ayana's letters. Ayana had dictated them to a palace scribe during her final months, unpublished, untouched, sacred. Each letter was written not to royalty, but to children, blind children, poor children, forgotten children. You are not broken. You are the truth no one dares speak. They may silence your voice, but never your heartbeat. The cane I held was not for walking. It was for reminding others to slow down and feel the ground. Mosi cried as he read, and then he did what Ayana would have wanted. He shared them. With the king's blessing, Mosi compiled the letters into a book titled Eyes of the Spirit. It was read across Africa, translated into 20 languages. Children memorized entire pages. Poets weaved her words into songs. Artists painted murals on palace walls. But something else happened too. Blind children were now honored in festivals. Rural children received scholarships in her name. And once a year, on the day of the whisper, everyone in Nyandala went silent for 1 minute. to listen for Ayana's voice in the wind. In the quiet Valley of Tomb, a little girl named Zira sat beneath a fig tree, eyes cloudy like stormy glass. She was blind, often mocked, forgotten by even her own father. But on her 8th birthday, her village elder handed her a small book, Eyes of the Spirit. She read it, every page, with her fingers. She wept. She laughed. She whispered Ayana's name to the night, and the next day she stood up and declared, "I am not afraid anymore." Zira would go on to become the first blind chief of her province, and her staff, carved from ashwood. In time, Nyandula created a ritual called the Seeing. It was a rite of passage, not for warriors, not for nobles, but for every child, regardless of wealth or status. At age 12, every child was blindfolded for one day. They were asked to walk with a guide, to listen, to feel, to speak only when necessary. Then they would sit beside the river and answer one question. What did you learn when you couldn't see? The answers were etched in stone, read aloud during village gatherings, and year after year the children learned what Ayana always knew. Silence teaches more than sight. For decades, drought had haunted parts of the kingdom, but one year, after the largest seeing ceremony in Nyandula's history, the rains returned. The river Olo, which had shrunk into a whisper, roared once more. The villagers danced. Crops grew. The air sweetened with jasmine. Some said it was coincidence. Others said Ayana had returned. In every story, in every whisper, she lived again. Years later, when King Jabari finally passed at the age of 91, his final wish was not for a statue of himself. It was for a garden, a wild, untamed healing garden in the heart of Baruka. At its center stood a stone, not carved into a face, but into words. She could not see the world, but she showed us how to live in it. And around that stone grew fig trees, lilies, and jasmine. And every spring, children came from all corners to listen, not to speeches, but to the wind. They say Ayana's voice still hums in fig leaves, that her steps echo in the canes of blind children, walking with pride, that her silence is louder than war drums, stronger than kings, deeper than gold. And every time a child says, "I am not afraid to be forgotten," the world remembers her, Ayana, the blind orphan who changed a kingdom, and then the world. Generations had passed since Ayana's voice last echoed through the royal courts, but in the heart of Nyandula, her spirit still moved like the wind, unseen but never unfelt. In the village of Barumo, nestled between two rivers, a new child was born. Her name was Tami. She was born blind, just like Ayana. The village healer wept when she held her, whispering, "Another spirit walks among us." But this time, no one feared her. No one abandoned her. Instead, elders sang the lullaby of Ayana the night she was born. Tami, like Ayana, grew with questions on her tongue and silence in her soul. At age 12, Tami attended her first festival of voices in Baruka. Children gathered from every village to share wisdom they had written from their Seeing Day experiences. Tami stood at the center stage, barefoot, her hair braided with river stones. She spoke. "They say blindness is silence, but I hear more than the sighted. I hear lies people tell themselves. I hear fear in the footsteps of kings. I hear love hiding in broken voices. I do not need sight to see your pain or your power." The crowd erupted. Elders wept. Aya, Prince bowed. Tami had become something more than just a girl. She had become a mirror. Soon after, a threat rose from Nyandula's western borders. A new warlord from the Droughtlands sought to seize Nyandula's southern provinces. The Royal Council debated retaliation, but Tami, still only 14, stood and asked, "Have we asked why he fights?" No one had. Tammy traveled with envoys to the Droughtlands. There, she met the warlord, a scarred man named Makalu, who had lost his wife and children during the famine. "I do not seek war," he said. "I seek water. I seek life." Tammy brought his story back to the king. Instead of war, Nyandala built an aqueduct from the northern springs to the Droughtlands. Peace was made, and again, the people whispered, "Ayana walks among us." Years later, the king of Nyandala commissioned a school unlike any other. It was not for warriors, not for nobles, but for the unseen, the blind, the orphaned, the forgotten. They named it the Academy of the Spirit. Tammy became its first headmistress. Inside its walls, silence was sacred. Listening was power. And every student was taught the story of Ayana, not as legend, but as guide. Above the academy gate, chiseled in stone, we do not teach eyes to see. We teach souls to feel. One rainy evening, a woman arrived at the academy gates, drenched, trembling, and holding a child wrapped in cloth. She was from a far-off village, fleeing a cruel marriage, seeking hope. The child she held was deaf and "Mute, please," she begged Tammy. "They said this place doesn't turn away the lost." Tammy smiled. "We don't." The child grew to become a painter, using touch and memory to recreate entire landscapes on clay, using only his fingers. His art would travel the world, and beside each signature, he pressed a thumbprint with a single word: Ayana. One night, as Tammy stood beneath the stars, she heard the wind, and in it, a whisper, soft but clear. "Well done." She turned, but no one was there. Only fig trees swaying gently and the stars blinking like a mother's watchful eyes. Ayana's spirit didn't haunt the land. She nurtured it. Every act of kindness, every choice of peace, every hand held in darkness, she was there, still blind, still brave, still watching with her heart. And so, from a child cast away in a basket of river reeds, to a prophet who healed kings, to the spirit who lit the path for future generations, Ayana became more than a tale. She became a way of life, and in the land of Nyandala, when babies cry and elders hum by firelight and blind children walk with pride, the people smile and say, "She still sees us." Many years had passed. The eyes of the spirit had become a sacred text across Nyandala, protected in the royal archive. But one stormy night, it vanished. Thieves had broken into the vault, not for gold, not for jewels, but for that one fragile book. The kingdom mourned as if they had lost Ayana all over again. No ransom came, no trail was left. The silence was heavy, unnatural. That's when Tammy, now an elder and honored speaker, gathered her students and said, "We do not panic when the flame flickers. We become the fire." In the heart of Baruka, Tammy and her students began to rewrite the lost text, not word for word, but from memory. Each student contributed the passages that changed their lives. One remembered, "Even silence can shout louder." Then war drums. Another whispered, "Your brokenness is your crown." As they rewrote, the people came, by the hundreds. Then thousands, villages, royals, foreigners, all sat in the garden and shared Ayana's words, like threads of light spun from their own hearts. The new book was named The Flame of the Blind Prophet. It was not a replacement, it was a resurrection. During this time, another child emerged, Kemi, a girl born during a month-long rainstorm in the coastal village of Lesha. She could not walk, but her mind was sharper than the king's blade. From age 6, she memorized entire pages of Ayana's teachings. By 10, she began composing her own. She wrote on banana leaves, painted with dyes from hibiscus and charcoal. Her messages traveled like wildfire. The world doesn't fear blindness. It fears those who see with their soul. If Ayana was the river, I am the rain. Soon, whispers spread. A new prophet has risen. 10 years after it vanished, a weary traveler arrived in the capital, carrying a weathered scroll wrapped in tiger grass. He had found the stolen eyes of the spirit in a cave near the Iron Hills, buried beside the bones of the thieves, who had died in silence, cursed by their greed. The king wept as he touched the pages, now brittle and fragile. The book was never locked away again. Instead, it was placed in the garden of the spirit, open, beneath glass where children read it under moonlight. Ayana had returned. Tammy, before her final days, established the Council of Oracles, a group of visionaries, disabled or disadvantaged in some way, chosen not by power but by wisdom. They met once a year, not in castles, but in forest groves and desert oases. Their role? To advise the kingdom based on listening, not politics. Their motto: we sit where the world forgets and speak what it dares not hear. From this council came laws protecting the poor, healing the land, and silencing the drums of war. Nyandala became not just powerful, but just. One night, Tammy, old and near her final breath, sat under the fig tree planted over Ayana's resting place. She heard a child's laughter in the distance, wind in the leaves, a river gurgling beyond the trees, and then a firefly landed on her palm. She smiled. "Still watching over us, are you?" And then she closed her eyes. The firefly lifted into the air, alone, glowing, eternal. You may think, this story ends here, but it doesn't. Every time you show kindness, every time you choose to listen, every time you honor the forgotten, Ayana lives on. You are the new whisper in the wind. You are the spark beneath the ashes. You are the next chapter. Years passed, and stories of Ayana reached far beyond the borders of Nyandala. A merchant from the east once traded spices in exchange for a single page of Ayana's teachings. A poet in the frozen north sang her words through the snow. The eye that sees nothing often feels everything. A school in a war-torn region of the west rewrote their pledge around her spirit. Ayana, who never saw the world with her eyes, had touched every corner of it with her soul, and still, she asked for nothing in return, only remembrance. Many generations later, Ayana's lineage, once thought lost, was rediscovered. A girl named Layla from the coast of Lake Arami bore the same voice, the same rhythm of speech, the same calm in chaos. DNA confirmed it, but the people didn't care about science. They saw Ayana in Layla's refusal to walk past a beggar without kneeling, in her silence when others shouted, in her tears when a blind boy recited Ayana's river poem to a crowd. They called her Daughter of the Spirit. But Layla would always say, "I am not her blood, I am her breath." To mark 100 years since Ayana's death, Nyandala organized its greatest festival ever, the Jubilee of Spirit. But this time, there would be no music, no drums, no flutes, no chants. Instead, in perfect unity, the people stood in 1 minute of silence. Nation, breath held, birds paused their song, wind hushed, even the rivers slowed, and then, from nowhere, a child began to sign Ayana's words with their hands. Other children joined. The silent language rose like wildfire. Hands became voices, and across a field of thousands, her words were seen, not heard. In a remote village in the valley of Naluma, a small child found a cracked piece of mirror in the dirt. He picked it up, cleaned it, and stared. His face, dirty and forgotten, smiled. He had just learned of Ayana in his village's oral tales. He whispered, "If I can see myself, I can be something." That mirror became his treasure. Years later, he became a great healer, not because of medicine, but because he made every patient see themselves as worthy. On his wall hung that same mirror with a note. Ayana showed me. In the Royal Academy, a teacher asked, "If Ayana were alive today, what would she say to you?" A blind girl named Zara stood and said, "She'd say, 'Close your eyes, and you'll finally see what matters.'" The class went quiet. Then they closed their eyes one by one, until everyone sat in silence. And somehow, even in the darkness, they saw more than ever. And so now, dear listener, the story passes to you. Ayana was just a child, lost, blind, unwanted, but with a heart as deep as the river, a soul as steady as the fig tree. She didn't need sight to see the truth, and neither do you. So the next time you walk past someone unseen, the next time silence seems louder than words, remember her and whisper her name, Ayana. Not as a myth, not as a queen, but as a mirror, showing us who we truly are. The blind orphan who changed a kingdom and then the world. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy. Goodbye.